Hello, my name is Travis Langston, 38 years old, the sales director of Vital Pure, a leading pharmaceutical and cosmetics company in the United States. It sounds glamorous, but if you ask me, I'm just a guy trying to keep everything from falling apart, from million-dollar contracts to the hearts of those I love. I live in a modern apartment in downtown Chicago where large glass windows open to a cityscape twinkling with lights every night, as if they're telling stories that never end. But if I had to choose a place to call home, I'd say it's my office at Vital Pure, a room overflowing with papers, planning boards, and cold cups of coffee on the desk. Vital Pure is not just a company. It's my family's legacy, the dream my father, Dean Langston, built from a tiny laboratory in the garage of our suburban Illinois home. From affordable generic drugs to globally sought-after natural cosmetics lines, Vital Pure has become a name mentioned in high-end boardrooms from New York to Tokyo. I'm proud to be part of that journey, but if you think this story is all about glamour, you haven't heard about the dark corners of my family. I stand by the window of my office looking down at the bustling traffic on Michigan Avenue. The fiery red sunset paints the sky, a reminder that the day is coming to an end. But my work never stops. On my desk, a contract with ValueCare, a global pharmaceutical retail chain, awaits my signature. A deal worth hundreds of millions of dollars, enough to take Vital Pure to new heights. I've spent months negotiating, persuading, and sometimes fighting to keep promises with tough partners. But as I look at the contract, what I feel isn't joy, but a sharp, deep pain in my chest, a pain that has followed me for 30 years. I wasn't always Travis Langston, the confident sales director respected by employees and trusted by partners. There was a time when I was just a 10-year-old boy sitting in the back seat of the family car fighting over a superhero toy with my younger brother, Curtis. Our parents were in the front seats, Mom humming an old song, Dad laughing loudly, recounting stories of his early entrepreneurial days. It was a perfect evening until everything shattered. I'll never forget that moment. The sound of metal crashing, the blinding glare of headlights, and my mother's scream. In an instant, our car flipped over on the highway. Dad and Curtis were only slightly injured, as was I, but Mom, she never woke up. My mother's death is a wound that never healed in our family. My father, Dean, has never forgiven me. He said that if I hadn't been arguing with Curtis, if I hadn't distracted him while he was driving, Mom might still be alive. Maybe he's right. Maybe I really was the cause, but I was only 10 and I've carried that guilt my entire life, like a shadow that never leaves. I return to my desk, trying to push away the old memories. But they cling to me, especially on days like today, when I know my father will once again fail to acknowledge what I've done for Vital Pure. For over a decade, I've poured sweat and heart into turning the company from a small business into a pharmaceutical giant. I've flown across dozens of time zones, eaten hurried meals on planes, and signed contracts that would leave anyone in awe. But to Dad, I'm never good enough. Never good enough to step out from the shadow of Curtis, the younger brother he's doted on since Mom's death. Curtis. Just thinking of his name sends a surge of heat through my chest. Curtis is 4 years younger than me, currently somewhere in Europe, completing his PhD in pharmacology at a prestigious university. He's brilliant, no doubt about it. But while I'm here fighting every day to keep Vital Pure strong, Curtis is seen by Dad as the family's crown jewel. He'll do great things, Dad often says, his eyes gleaming with pride. And me? I'm just the older brother living in the shadow of disappointment. A knock at the door pulls me out of my thoughts. It's Sarah, my assistant, who's been with me through endless long days and sleepless nights of negotiations. She walks in holding a fresh cup of coffee, her gentle smile saying she knows how exhausted I am. "Travis, you okay?" Sarah asks, placing the coffee on my desk. "You look like you just ran a marathon." I give a faint smile, trying to hide my fatigue. "Just a long day, Sarah. The ValueCare contract is giving me a headache." "A headache? Or is your dad giving you a headache again?" She raises an eyebrow, her tone playful but pointed. Sarah knows all about my father. She's witnessed the times he's called just to criticize me, The times he's publicly praised Curtis in board meetings despite Curtis contributing nothing but a prestigious degree. I don't answer, just shrug and take a sip of coffee. The bitterness slides down my throat, but it does nothing to ease the ache in my heart. I've been here 6 years, and I've never seen anyone work as hard as you, Sarah continues, sitting in the chair across from me. This value care contract, it's a game changer, and you're the one making it happen, not Curtis, not your dad, you. I smile, but it doesn't reach my eyes. Thanks, Sarah. But you know what my dad will think. Travis, you did well, but Curtis would do better. She shakes her head, her expression frustrated. He's not fair to you. Everyone here sees that. You're the heart of Vital Pure, Travis. Without you, this company wouldn't be where it is today. I want to believe Sarah, I really do. But deep down, I know my father will never see me the way he sees Curtis. And perhaps the most painful part is that I keep trying day after day to prove I'm worthy. Not just to Dad, but to myself. I glance at the clock. It's almost 7 p.m. My wife, Emily, is probably waiting for me at home with our 2 young daughters. Lily, our 6-year-old with a smile as bright as the sun, and Ava, our 3-month-old, who I rarely have time to hold. I promised Emily I'd be home early tonight, but the value care contract still needs one more review. Just one more, I tell myself, but I know it's a familiar lie. I open my laptop, the blue light from the screen illuminating my face. The numbers, clauses, and signatures of the value care contract are like a maze I've memorized. This isn't just a contract. It's proof of the years I've sacrificed, the sleepless nights, and the moments I've missed with my family. If I can pull this off, maybe Dad will see me differently. Maybe he'll see I'm not just the boy who caused the accident all those years ago. But as I read the final clause, my phone rings. It's Dad. My heart sinks. He rarely calls at this hour unless it's something important. I take a deep breath, bracing myself for a conversation I know won't be easy. Travis, his voice comes through the speaker, cold and sharp as always. We need to talk about Curtis. I grip the phone tightly, trying to keep my voice steady. About Curtis? How's he doing? My youngest son is coming back, he says, his tone laced with the pride I've heard too many times. He's finished his PhD program. I want him to take on a major role in the company. My blood feels like it stops flowing. What role, Dad? I ask, though I already suspect the answer. CEO, he says without hesitation. I think it's time for Curtis to lead Vital Pure. The world around me seems to slow down. CEO, the position I've quietly hoped for, though I never dared say it out loud. The position I've worked tirelessly for a decade to prove I deserve. And now Dad wants to hand it to Curtis, the brother who's never set foot in this office, never signed a contract or faced the pressures of the market. Dad, I say, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay calm. I've worked for Vital Pure for over a decade. I've brought in major contracts, expanded markets, built teams. I think I deserve to be considered. There's a pause on the other end, long enough for me to feel his disappointment. Travis, he finally says, his voice low and cold. You've done well, but Curtis has the credentials. He has the vision. I believe he'll take the company further. I don't respond. I can't. My throat tightens as if someone's squeezing it. I hear him continue speaking, but his words are just a distant echo. When the call ends, I sit there, alone in my office with the value care contract in front of me and a nameless pain gripping my heart. I know things are about to change, and deep down I know that my battle with Dad, with Curtis, and with myself has only just begun. The days following my father's call felt like walking on a thin tightrope, where even the slightest breeze could send me plummeting into an abyss. I still went to the office every day, still checked emails, still met with the sales team, but my mind was no longer there. It was trapped in my father's words. Curtis will be CEO. Those words echoed in my head like a haunting, wordless melody. I tried to focus on the value care contract, the one I'd poured my heart into for the past 6 months. But every time I opened the document, all I could see was Curtis's face. My younger brother with his confident smile and eyes that always seemed to look down on me. Curtis returned on a Tuesday morning under a gray Chicago sky drizzling with rain. I was in the boardroom presenting our strategy for expanding into the Asian market to the team when Sarah knocked on the door, her face tense. "Travis, he's here," she whispered, her eyes filled with worry. I nodded, trying to maintain my composure, but my heart pounded as if it might burst out of my chest. I knew today was the day Curtis would officially show up at Vital Pure, but I didn't expect it to happen so soon. When I stepped into the main lobby, the entire company seemed to hold its breath. Curtis stood there, tall and imposing, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit, his hair neatly swept back and a radiant smile as if he'd just stepped out of a fashion magazine. Behind him was Dad, Dean, his eyes gleaming with undisguised pride. A chill ran down my spine. How long had it been since Dad looked at me like that? Probably since before that fateful night when Mom was still alive, when our family was still whole. "Travis!" Curtis called out loudly, his voice echoing through the lobby. He strode toward me, arms outstretched as if to hug me, but I only nodded and shook his hand. His grip was firm, but the handshake lacked warmth. "Long time no see, big brother," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Heard you're doing well with the value care contract. Not bad." Not bad. Those two words felt like a slap in the face. I'd poured sweat, tears, and sleepless nights into securing that contract, and all Curtis could say was not bad? I clenched my teeth, trying to keep my tone light. "Thanks, Curtis. You look healthy." Dad clapped Curtis on the shoulder as if reminding the world that this was his pride and joy. "The whole company needs to brace itself," he declared, his voice booming like he was giving a speech. "Today is a special day. Curtis, my youngest son, has completed his PhD in pharmacology at Oxford University, and I'm proud to announce that he will take on the role of CEO of Vital Pure starting next week." Silence. A heavy silence blanketed the lobby. I looked around, catching the eyes of the employees, from Sarah, my ever-loyal assistant, to Mike, the head of finance, and Anna, the marketing director. They were stunned, as if someone had doused them with ice-cold water. I knew what they were thinking. I knew because I was thinking it too. I'd worked for over a decade, secured dozens of major contracts, built a global network of partners, and now all of that was being brushed aside just because Curtis had a PhD. My throat tightened, but I couldn't let myself lose control. Not in front of Curtis, and especially not in front of Dad. "Congratulations, Curtis," I said, my voice flat, though inside I was screaming. "I'm sure you'll do great." Curtis grinned, a smug smile I knew all too well. "Thanks, Travis. Don't worry, I'll take Vital Pure to new heights." I wanted to respond, to say that Vital Pure was already at new heights, that I'd sacrificed so much to get the company to this point, but I only nodded and turned away. Sarah followed me, her steps hurried. "Travis, you can't let this happen," she whispered as we entered the elevator. "Everyone in the company knows you deserve better. Curtis hasn't even worked here." "Sarah," I cut her off, my voice weary. "I don't have a choice. My dad's made his decision." "But you can fight for it," she pressed, her eyes blazing with anger on my behalf. "You've given everything to this company. You can't let Curtis take it all just because Dean favors him." I didn't answer. Not because I disagreed with Sarah, but because I didn't know what to do. Fight Dad? I'd been doing that my whole life and never won. Fight Curtis? He's my brother, even if our relationship has been fractured for years. I just wanted to focus on my work, on the value care contract, and hope that one day Dad would see my worth. But the days that followed proved that hope was more fragile than I thought. Curtis started appearing all over the company, confident as if he'd been working here his whole life. He held meetings without inviting me, proposed bold but impractical ideas like investing millions in a new cosmetics line without market research. Employees began whispering behind his back, frustrated with his lack of experience, but no one dared speak up. No one, except Sarah. "Travis, don't you see?" she said one afternoon as we grabbed sandwiches in the break room. "Curtis is messing everything up. Yesterday, he told the marketing team to cancel the ad campaign for the new generic drug line because he thought it wasn't luxurious enough. He doesn't understand the market at all." I sipped my coffee, trying to stay calm. Sarah, I know, but my dad believes in Curtis, and as long as he's backing him, there's nothing we can do. But you can, Sarah nearly shouted, causing a few nearby employees to glance over. She lowered her voice, but her eyes still burned. Travis, you're the one keeping this company standing. If you don't speak up, who will? I looked at Sarah, feeling the sincerity in her words. But deep down, I was exhausted. Exhausted from proving myself, exhausted from living in Curtis's shadow, and exhausted from Dad's words echoing in my head. You've done well, but Curtis will do better. The following week, during the board meeting, Dad officially announced Curtis as CEO. I sat at the end of the table, listening to him praise Curtis's credentials, his published research, and the strategic vision he would bring. I looked around, seeing the averted gazes of the board members. They knew the truth. They knew what I'd done for Vital Pure. But no one dared say anything because Dad was the founder, the one with ultimate authority. When the meeting ended, Curtis stood up, clapping his hands like an actor on stage. I'm honored to lead Vital Pure, he said, his voice smooth as a politician's. We're entering a new era with fresh ideas, and I hope everyone, including my brother Travis, will support me. The room turned to look at me. My face burned, not from embarrassment, but from anger. But I smiled, nodded, and said, Of course, Curtis. I'll support you. That night, I came home later than usual. Emily was waiting for me in the living room with Lily asleep on the couch and Ava in her arms. Travis, Emily whispered, her eyes full of concern. Are you okay? You look like you've been through a storm. I sat beside her, pulling Lily into my arms and kissing her forehead. I don't know, Em, I said, my voice hoarse. Curtis has been named CEO. Dad chose him. Emily placed a hand on my shoulder, her eyes full of empathy. You've done everything for that company, Travis. If your dad can't see that, he doesn't deserve you. I wanted to believe her. Looking at Lily sleeping peacefully in my arms, I suddenly thought, I can't let my daughters grow up in a family full of wounds like mine did. I have to fight, not just for myself, but for them. But I didn't know then that Curtis was already making his first moves to push me out of Vital Pure, and the battle's climax had officially been ignited. The weeks after Curtis officially became CEO, the atmosphere at Vital Pure shifted like the Chicago sky before a storm. The office, once filled with laughter and the enthusiasm of the team, was now cloaked in stifling tension. I felt it in the averted gazes of employees, in the abruptly cut-off conversations, and in the way people looked at me, as if they were waiting for me to do something, anything to break this silence. But I didn't know what to do. All I knew was to keep my head down and continue working as I had for the past 10 years. Curtis, on the other hand, seemed to revel in his new role. He strode into the office each morning like a young king, clad in expensive suits and wearing a smug smile. He held endless meetings, proposing ideas I knew would fail if implemented, like redirecting the entire advertising budget to social media platforms without market research, or demanding the R&D team develop a new cosmetics line just because he thought it would be trendy. I tried to offer input, not to challenge him, but because I genuinely cared about Vital Pure's future. But every time I opened my mouth, Curtis cut me off, often in front of the entire team. Travis, you always stick to the old ways, don't you? He said during a strategy meeting, his tone light but sharp as a blade. We need innovation, big brother. The era of conservative strategies is over. The room fell silent. I felt the heat rising to my face, but I only nodded and jotted down a note. I didn't want to argue in front of the staff. They were already frustrated enough with Curtis. I didn't need to add fuel to the fire. But inside, I felt like I'd been stabbed. The conservative strategies Curtis mocked were the very ones that had transformed Vital Pure from a small business into a pharmaceutical giant. I had built relationships with partners, negotiated deals no one thought we could win, and now it was all dismissed as outdated. Sarah, as always, was the only one who dared to speak up. After a meeting where Curtis publicly criticized me for lacking vision, she pulled me into the break room and slammed the door shut. Travis, you can't keep letting him do this, she said, her voice trembling with anger. He's deliberately undermining you. Everyone sees it. Yesterday, he assigned you to revise a sales report, a job for an intern. You're the sales director, Travis. I shrugged, trying to stay calm, but the truth was I was seething. Sarah, I don't want to start a war with Curtis. He's my brother, and Dad chose him. Your brother? Sarah nearly shouted. He doesn't see you as a brother. He sees you as a threat, Travis. Don't you get it? Everyone in this company respects you, not him. And that's driving him crazy. I looked at Sarah, wanting to argue, but I knew she was right. Curtis wasn't just arrogant, he was deliberately sidelining me. The meaningless tasks, the public criticisms, the times he ignored my input in meetings, it was all part of a plan to push me out of the spotlight. But what hurt most wasn't Curtis's actions. It was Dad's silence. He knew what was happening, yet not once did he intervene. Not once did he call me into his office and say, "Travis, I see what you've done for this company." Not once did he take my side. One afternoon, as I was working on the value care contract, Curtis walked into my office without knocking. He leaned against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, looking at me as if I were a low-level employee. "Travis, I need you to prepare a report on last quarter's sales performance. I want it on my desk by the end of the day," he said, his tone commanding. I looked up, trying to keep my voice steady. "Curtis, I'm working on the value care contract. It's more important. If you need a report, you can ask the finance team to do it." Curtis smirked, stepping into the room and sitting in the chair across from me. "Travis, don't you get it? I'm the CEO. When I ask for something, you do it. The value care contract? I'll have someone else handle it. Just focus on what I've assigned you." I felt my blood boil. "Someone else?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "Curtis, I'm the only one authorized to negotiate this contract. Value care only deals with me. If you hand it off to someone else, we'll lose the deal." Curtis shrugged as if it didn't matter. "If we lose it, I'll handle it. Just do the report, Travis. Don't let me down." He stood up and left, leaving me sitting there, my hands clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. I wanted to run after him, to yell in his face that I'd sacrificed everything for Vital Pure, that I wasn't some low-level employee he could order around. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the laptop screen where the value care contract was still open. I knew if I didn't complete it, the company would be at risk. But if I kept letting Curtis push me around, I'd lose myself. In the days that followed, Curtis's behavior only worsened. He publicly diminished my role in meetings, calling my strategies outdated and uncreative. He assigned me trivial tasks, like scheduling meetings or checking emails, while the sales team, once reporting directly to me, was reassigned to work under a new director Curtis had appointed. I felt like I was being erased from Vital Pure bit by bit. But what hurt most was how the employees looked at me. They no longer came to my office for advice or to share ideas. They were afraid that working with me would make them targets for Curtis. Only Sarah stayed by my side, still fighting for me even when I told her not to. "Travis, if you give up, this company will fall apart," she said one day as we stood on the office balcony looking down at the traffic below. "You're the soul of Vital Pure. Curtis can't replace you no matter how hard he tries." I believed her, but I was exhausted. Each passing day made me feel smaller, as if everything I'd built was crumbling. And then, the moment I never thought would come arrived. It was a Friday morning, and I was preparing for the final meeting with Value Care. I'd worked through the night, reviewing every clause, ensuring everything was perfect. This was the biggest contract in Vital Pure's history, and I knew it would change everything. But when I walked into my office, Curtis was waiting for me, sitting behind my desk as if it were his. "Travis," he said, his voice cold as ice. "We need to talk." I stood there, still holding my coffee, feeling like the floor was collapsing beneath me. "What's this about, Curtis?" He stood up, stepping closer to me, his eyes sharp and cold. "I've been thinking a lot. You're a good employee, Travis, but I don't think you fit with Vital Pure's new vision. You lack creativity, innovation. I need people who can keep up with me." My heart stopped. "What are you saying?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "I'm firing you," Curtis said, his voice flat like he was reading a weather report. "Today is your last day at Vital Pure." The world around me shattered. I stood there, staring at my brother's face. The brother I'd once protected, loved, and hoped would be my partner in building our family's legacy. But now, he stood before me without a hint of remorse or hesitation. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about the job. It was about jealousy. Curtis was jealous of the respect I'd earned from employees, from partners, from the people he could never win over. "Curtis," I said, my voice hoarse, "do you know what you're doing? The value care contract?" "I'll handle it," he cut me off, turning his back and walking out of the room. "Pack up your things by the end of the day, Travis." The door closed and I stood alone in the office I'd called home for 10 years. I looked around, at the family photos on my desk, the awards hanging on the wall, and the value care contract still open on my laptop screen. Everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed was erased with a single sentence from Curtis. I didn't cry, not because I was strong, but because I was too shocked, too hurt to do anything. I just sat down, head in my hands, and wondered what had led to this. Was it my fault for not fighting harder? Or Curtis's for letting jealousy cloud his judgment? Or Dad's for allowing all of this to happen? The day I left Vital Pure, Chicago was drenched in a torrential downpour, as if the entire city was weeping on my behalf. I stood under the building's awning, clutching a cardboard box filled with the mementos of 10 years of dedication. A framed photo of Emily and me on our wedding day. A few yellowed certificates of achievement, and an old coffee mug Sarah gave me last Christmas. I looked up at Vital Pure's gleaming glass tower where I'd spent nearly all of my youth and felt a cold emptiness spread through my chest. I hadn't just lost a job, I'd lost a part of myself. When I got home, Emily was in the kitchen softly singing a lullaby while cradling Ava, our 3-month-old. Lily, our older daughter, was sitting on the floor scribbling a colorful drawing. When she saw me, Lily squealed, "Daddy!" and rushed to hug me, knocking over her box of crayons. "You're home early?" Lily beamed, her eyes sparkling. "Will you play with me, Daddy?" I drew a dragon, but it doesn't have wings yet. I laughed for the first time that day and scooped her up. "All right, princess, but I bet your dragon will fly higher than Daddy ever could." Emily looked at me, her gaze gentle but worried. She knew I never came home this early, never left work unfinished. "Travis," she said, setting Ava in her crib and stepping closer to me. "What happened?" I told her everything, about Curtis, about being fired, about feeling like the world was crumbling beneath my feet. Emily listened without interrupting, holding my hand tightly as if to lend me her strength. When I finished, she pulled me into a hug and I felt her warmth, the only thing keeping me from breaking apart. "You don't need Vital Pure to prove your worth," Emily whispered. "You're Lily and Ava's dad. You're my husband. And you're the most incredible man I've ever known." I wanted to believe her, I really did. But as I looked into Lily's clear eyes, as I heard Ava's giggling laughter, I couldn't help but think of Dad. He'd built Vital Pure from nothing, and I'd spent my life carrying on that legacy. Now it was all in Curtis's hands. Someone who didn't understand its value, who didn't understand what I'd sacrificed. The days that followed were a strange contrast. At home, I found joy I'd missed during years of relentless work. I took Lily to the park, building sandcastles with her and chasing pigeons. I spent long nights holding Ava, feeling her tiny breaths against my chest and listening to Emily talk about her dreams. Dreams I'd rarely had time to hear before. Those moments were like precious gems, sparkling amidst the darkness of the pain in my heart. But at Vital Pure, everything was falling apart. Sarah called almost daily, updating me with increasingly desperate news. Curtis, with his blind confidence, had tried to take over the Value Care contract. He held meetings with Value Care's team, making lofty promises without understanding the terms. The partners grew suspicious, demanding to meet with me, the only authorized representative they recognized. Instead of admitting his mistake, Curtis blamed the sales team, throwing the company into chaos. Some veteran employees, like Mike from finance, had even submitted their resignations. Travis, he doesn't know what he's doing, Sarah said during one call, her voice trembling. Yesterday, ValueCare sent an email warning that if you don't return, they'll cancel the contract. The company could lose hundreds of millions and our reputation will be ruined. Curtis is trying to cover it up, but everyone knows the truth. Hearing Sarah's account made my blood boil, but I didn't know what to do. I was no longer part of Vital Pure. I had no authority, no voice. Then one evening, as I was reading a bedtime story to Lily, my phone rang. It was Dad. "Travis," his voice came through, not as cold as usual, but tinged with worry. "I need to talk to you." I took a deep breath, bracing myself. "About what, Dad?" "About Curtis," he said, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "He made mistakes. The ValueCare contract is at risk. The partners won't work with anyone but you. I need you to come back, Travis. The company needs you." I fell silent, feeling as if my heart was being squeezed. This was what I'd been waiting for. A shred of acknowledgement from Dad, even if it was small. But it came too late, and it came at the cost of Curtis's failure. I didn't know what to feel, anger, satisfaction, or just pain. "Dad," I said, my voice steady. "Curtis fired me. You let him do that. Why do you want me back now?" There was a pause on the other end, then Dad sighed. "I was wrong to think Curtis could handle it. He's inexperienced. But you, Travis, you know how important this contract is. If we lose ValueCare, Vital Pure will face a crisis. You can't let the company collapse, can you?" I looked at Lily sleeping peacefully in my arms and thought of Mom. I thought of the days she sat in the garage, helping Dad mix the first batches of medicine. I thought of everything I'd sacrificed and everything I still wanted to protect. But I also thought of Curtis and how he'd pushed me out of the company I'd spent my life building. "Dad," I said, my voice firmer than I ever thought it could be. "I'll come back, but on one condition. I want to be CEO. I've spent 10 years building Vital Pure and I deserve that position. As for Curtis, if he wants to stay, he needs to start as a sales rep, learning from the ground up like I did." There was silence on the other end, a heavy silence so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. Then Dad's voice came through, sharp and angry like a sudden storm. "Travis, what are you saying? You dare make demands of me? Who do you think you are to ask for this? Curtis is your brother, my pride. You've gone too far, Travis. You don't respect your family. You don't respect me." His words stabbed into my heart like a knife. I'd prepared for resistance, but the venom in his voice still stunned me. "Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling, "I'm not disrespecting the family, but I've sacrificed everything for Vital Pure while Curtis just walked in and tore it all down. If you want me to save the ValueCare contract, you have to be fair to me." "Fair?" Dad nearly shouted. "You talk about fairness when you're trying to humiliate your brother? I won't let you take advantage of this situation, Travis. I'll find a way to save the contract without you." He hung up, and the long beep of the disconnected call rang like a verdict. I sat there, staring at the phone screen, feeling as if the world had collapsed around me once again. But amidst the pain, a small spark ignited. For the first time in my life, I'd spoken up for what I wanted, and even though Dad rejected it, I knew I wouldn't back down. The days following my call with Dad were a strange limbo, as if I were standing on the edge between hope and despair. His words, "I'll find a way to save the contract without you," echoed in my mind, sharp as a blade. I'd laid out my condition, CEO for me, Curtis, starting as a sales rep. Not out of ambition, but out of a desire for justice. I wanted Dad to see what I'd done for Vital Pure, to acknowledge that I, not Curtis, was the one who deserved to lead our family's legacy. But Dad had refused, and I knew he wouldn't yield easily. He was Dean Langston, the man who built Vital Pure from a small garage lab, who never bowed to adversity. I wondered if he truly believed he could save the ValueCare contract without me, or if it was just the pride of a father unwilling to admit his mistake. In the meantime, I sought solace in my family. Mornings with Lily and Ava became the only medicine keeping me from sinking into darkness. I walked Lily to school, holding her hand as we strolled through the park, listening to her innocent stories about the flying dragon she'd drawn. Ava, with her wide eyes and carefree smile made me realize how much I'd missed in the years of relentless work. Emily, as always, was my rock. "Travis," she said one evening as we sat on the couch, "no matter what happens, you're our hero. Vital Pure doesn't define you, we do." I held her close, her warmth a reminder that I still had a family, a reason to keep going. But deep down, I couldn't stop thinking about Vital Pure. I couldn't stop thinking about employees like Sarah, Mike, and Anna, who had trusted me, and about the ValueCare contract, which I'd poured sweat and tears into building. I couldn't let Curtis destroy it all. Couldn't let Mom's legacy, the dream she shared with Dad in the early days, vanish because of my brother's arrogance. A week passed and Sarah called again. Her voice trembled, no longer with the anger of before, but with desperation. "Travis, everything's falling apart," she said. "Dean met with ValueCare himself, trying to negotiate in your place. But they refused. They made it clear the contract is only valid if you're the official representative. Curtis he's panicking. He's blaming everyone from the sales team to the legal department. Travis, if you don't come back, the company will lose everything." I sank into a chair, a cold chill running down my spine. I'd known Curtis couldn't handle the ValueCare contract, but hearing Sarah confirm it still made my heart clench. I thought of Dad, of his arrogance in dismissing my condition, and wondered if he realized his mistake. But I didn't call him back. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed him to come to me. I needed him to admit that I, Travis Langston, was the only one who could save Vital Pure. 2 days later, my phone rang at midnight. It was Dad. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, but I didn't answer right away. I let it ring a few more times, as if prolonging the moment I knew he needed me. Finally, I pressed the answer button, my voice strangely calm. "Dad?" "Travis." His voice was hoarse, as if he hadn't slept in days. "I was wrong. I tried meeting with ValueCare, but they won't work with me. They only want you. The contract, it's on the brink of falling apart. If we lose it, Vital Pure won't recover." I stayed silent, letting his words sink deep into me. This was the first time in my life I'd heard Dad admit he was wrong, but it didn't bring the satisfaction I'd once imagined. Instead, I felt a profound sadness. "Dad," I said, my voice steady, "I told you my condition. I'll come back, but I want to be CEO. Curtis needs to start as a sales rep, learning from the ground up. If you don't agree, I won't return." There was silence on the other end, so long I thought he'd hung up. Then he spoke, his voice low and heavy. "Travis, you're forcing my hand, but I have no choice. I agree, you'll be CEO. Curtis will be a sales rep. But you have to promise me, Travis. You have to save this contract, save this company." A surge of adrenaline coursed through me, but I kept my voice calm. "I will." When I hung up, I felt as if I'd shed a burden I'd carried for decades. I didn't know if I could forgive Dad or Curtis, but I knew I'd reclaimed what I deserved. The day I returned to Vital Pure, the atmosphere in the company was electric. Sarah was the first to rush over and hug me, tears glistening in her eyes. "Travis, you did it!" she exclaimed. "I knew you wouldn't abandon us." Other employees gathered around, offering handshakes, smiles, and whispered thanks that made me realize I wasn't just the sales director. I was the soul of Vital Pure, as Sarah had once said. Curtis, on the other hand, didn't appear in the main lobby. I heard he was packing up his things with a somber expression. Dad had called him early that morning to deliver the news. Curtis would start over as a sales rep, reporting to a team leader I would appoint. I didn't know how he felt, angry, humiliated, or regretful. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. I had a contract to save and a company to lead. The first meeting with ValueCare took place the next day. I walked into the boardroom feeling the weight of the partners' gazes, people who had once trusted me, who had placed their faith in my abilities. Curtis had made a mess of things, but I knew I could fix it. I presented the strategy, answering every question with the confidence I'd honed through years of battles. When the meeting ended, Helen Carter, ValueCare's lead representative, shook my hand and said, "Travis, we only work with you. Thank you for coming back." The value care contract was signed a week later with a value exceeding even our initial expectations. The news spread quickly and Vital Pure once again became the talk of the pharmaceutical and cosmetics industry. The employees who had been rattled under Curtis's leadership now worked with renewed energy. I felt like the company was coming back to life, and for the first time I truly felt I belonged here. I was appointed CEO shortly after during a board meeting chaired by Dad. He looked at me, his eyes a mix of pride and reluctance, but he said nothing beyond announcing the decision. Curtis, sitting in the corner of the room, kept his head down, silent. I didn't know if he'd learned anything from this, but I hoped that in time he'd understand the value of hard work as I had. As CEO, I began reshaping Vital Pure. I encouraged transparency, created opportunities for employees to contribute ideas, and invested heavily in research and development for new products, from affordable generic drugs to eco-friendly natural cosmetics. I wanted Vital Pure to be more than a profit-driven company. I wanted it to be a place that fulfilled a dream, bringing health and beauty to everyone, rich or poor. Curtis, now a sales rep, started working under Anna, the marketing director I trusted. I didn't manage him directly. I didn't want to make things more personal than they already were, but Anna told me Curtis was trying. He still carried some of his arrogance, but he was beginning to learn how to listen, how to work as a team, and how to face small failures. I didn't know if we could mend our relationship, but I hoped that one day he'd understand I hadn't done this to diminish him, but to protect what we both cherished. Dad, meanwhile, gradually stepped back from the company's daily operations. He remained chairman of the board, but he spent more time at home, reflecting on what had happened. One morning, he came to my office and for the first time apologized. "Travis," he said, his voice low and weary, "I was wrong to favor Curtis. I let the pain of losing your mother cloud my judgment. I'm sorry." Those words came late, but they still brought a sting to my eyes. I nodded. "Thank you for trusting me." "Tonight, bring the family over for dinner," Dad said. "I want to celebrate your success." He turned and left, leaving me with an indescribable lightness. That evening, I brought Emily, Lily, and Ava to Dad's house in suburban Chicago, where old oak trees cast cool shadows. Dad greeted us at the door, hugging Lily and kissing Ava's cheek. His eyes lit with a joy I rarely saw. "Travis," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder, "you've done well. I'm proud of you." Those simple, sincere words warmed my heart, as if a piece of an old wound had finally begun to heal. The dinner table was set with dishes Mom used to love: roast beef, mashed potatoes, and warm apple pie. Emily chatted happily with Dad, sharing stories of Lily's antics, while I held Ava, feeling her tiny breaths. The atmosphere was warm, intimate, like a gentle melody soothing the tensions of the past months. But I noticed one thing. Curtis wasn't there. Dad didn't mention him, and I didn't ask. Perhaps he needed time, and I hoped that one day we could sit together again, not as rivals, but as brothers. As we raised our glasses in a toast, Dad's gaze lingered on me, and I saw in it the acknowledgement I'd waited years for. Vital Pure was thriving, and I, Travis Langston, had proven my worth, not just to Dad, but to myself. I looked at Emily, Lily, and Ava, and knew that no matter how rocky the road ahead might be, I would never be alone. My family, both old and new, was the fire that warmed my heart, and with them I was ready to face any challenge.